I would like to propose that we do it, is that we take 3 questions at a time. His memory can last long enough to remember 3 questions, he assured me. And then he will have a go. That way we can process a lot more questions from the audience.
What you have said in the Malaysian context, they will see you as seditious. That kind of speech. And without saying, we have seen you being taken in after the Chinese Assembly Hall speech with Adil Adam and Ken Chua and a few others. The whole paranoia, they will associate you with taking power, and that's why you have quit Bersih, who will continue to take a reformist line, right? Therefore, yes, it is good that you said that you are going to go to the kampung, de-brainwash the pakcik and makcik, but the state apparatus is very mindful and will do any attempt to stop you using people like Perkasa and others. And the thing I was trying to ask you about, you talk about Claire Newcastle, a successful Radio Sarawak One. I think she started Radio Free Malaysia. How successful is that? And couldn't we have like Hishamuddin Rais, a friend of mine, not the politician, the radical guy, informing Radio Bangsa. Couldn't we extend a network where the rakyat can listen in whatever, Malay, Chinese, or in that kind of language?
Another 2 more. Yes.
I'm just wondering if, in terms of getting support from the ground level, we've got a huge population of Malaysians here, plus supporters from, die-hard supporters from Malaysia for a better country in the future. What about the population of Malaysians living in Singapore? I understand there's up to 700 of them living there. And what do you see the future of tapping into that sort of support for you?
Thanks, Tony. One more? Sorry, just behind you.
I'm interested in what you say about getting into the Malay heartland. I think I would venture to say a little bit further that the objective is to, more like Abu, removing them from having any handshakes with UMNO. This does not include just the Malays. The Chinese, the Indians, some of them, just as bad. So would your program include reforming the Chinese and the Indians and the other non-Malays into thinking the same way what you propose them to be?
Well, I quit Bersih, and thanks for the question because it helps me to take a point that I wanted to take with you all. I quit Bersih after Bersih 2. That was the 9th of July. And I'm going to be very candid with you why I left. I never asked for this position of a civil society leader. It's been lumbered on me. But even as I accept that role, I think I have a moral duty to be honest with those on the ground. Now by 2.0, it became clear to me that UMNO Barisan Nasional was not going to give us any of the reforms. I mean, they can't. Indelible Ink 207, 208, 11th hour, they did an about turn. They can't. Take away the scope for one person voting twice, and they're not able to win the seats that they've set out to win. Clean up the electoral roll. It's never going to happen. So, with that in mind, my concern is this. Each time we have a rally, and we get people to come to ground to demand of UMNO BN these reforms, we are implicitly being dishonest in that we are perhaps suggesting to the public that they might still give us those reforms. Now, I've long believed it will never happen. And increasingly, I cannot see them giving us those reforms. And it was for that reason that I finally said, I've got to step down. That's one. Number two, this issue keeps cropping up again and again. We have to be non-partisan. I think that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous given what we know. And for instance, if you take the initiative that Persik came up with to go down again to the Malay heartland, Jom 100, which was an effort to get 100% voter attendance. You go down to the kampungs and you present to them the litany of UMNO and sins in the elections. And they listen to you and they say, okay, we see your point. Now, who should we vote for? And you apply brakes and say, oh, we are non-partisan, so we can't say it. We can't say the Abu word. That's crazy. Now, I could per se, because I felt if I'm a civil society leader, hundreds of Adam athletes are waiting to come out. So they can use the state apparatus, we're not afraid. Radio Free Malaysia. As I said, the only time I listen to the radio is when I'm stuck in the traffic. So yes, whilst it's there, you may have people listening to it, but again, our target has to be the Malay heartlands. The question on whether we will take these issues to the Indians and the Chinese, I can understand why Najib said it was a Chinese tsunami. The Chinese swing was near total. Even notwithstanding that, Abu did come out with material to deal with Chua Soy Lake's play on the Islamic State. But we take it into the Chinese new villages and they say what? Ayah Haris, tak payahlah, no need, go and spend your time in the kampungs. The Chinese swing was near total. Having said that, I agree, we should not be complacent. And we will continue to monitor, and as and when that movie star Chua Soy Lake comes up with any other issues, we will tackle them on the ground. The Indian vote, yes, there was a swing, an anticipated swing in some 24 constituencies. Whether it was related or connected to Vaidamurti and Hindraf's going mainstream is being analyzed now. But certainly as we move along, whilst the Malays in the heartlands are our priority, we will not leave any stone unturned. The diaspora in Singapore, I think, is slightly less than that 700,000 strong. Hong Kong has about something like 22,000. We intend to reach out all. I've said this in Canberra, I've said this in Melbourne, and I'm going to say this today in Sydney. Do not underestimate the power that you have. Now, I gave one example in Melbourne. You take the race, religion rhetoric that's driving through our media today. There's nothing to stop the good people of Sydney coming together, putting together a memorandum of concern at what is being articulated by Dr. Mahathir, by Ibrahim Ali, by Zahid Hamidi, Home Minister. This is atrocious. In any other jurisdiction, he would be asked to resign. Now, there's nothing to stop you getting this memorandum together, taking it to the Malaysian High Commission, taking it to your Member of Parliament and saying, why is the government of Australia not protesting and condemning what is panning out there? Now, in the same way, the people of Melbourne, the people of Canberra, the people in the Malaysians in Tokyo, the Malaysians in Singapore, and collectively, you will bring international pressure to bear on the government. Now, we've seen the amendments to the Prevention of Crime Act. which has surreptitiously brought in the equivalent of the ISA. And I am told by my friends, the commerce in UMNO, Haris, very soon you're home. I don't care. But again, the diaspora can rise. Can rise to condemn and to remind Najib of his promise of a slew of reforms, which are all now just forgotten. In the run-up to the elections, Abu was most ably assisted by the public at home and abroad with funding. We got over $1 million. And we've been transparent. If you go to my blog, the accounts have been audited with almost 543,000 still in the hands.
And 12 cents.
And 12 cents. And the Abu volunteers have a reason for that. They say Haris is a stingy kid. Haris is a stingy kid. I am. When it comes to public money, I am. So you've helped us out with funding. But I'll tell you this, friends, that's the lowest denominator, money. What we need is people standing up, home and abroad, in solidarity with us. And you can. Do not discount the formidable role you can play in righting the many wrongs at home.
Considering that the power is, and the cronyism is at the top, I guess we have to fight the top. But what worries me about that is that they've also got the arms. So what's going to happen to opposition in the streets? Are they going to be slaughtered? And also, not being Malaysian, I wonder whether you could tell me what ABU stands for.
Now, can we have a class action, a diaspora, a class action to freeze the money of all these people who got ill-gotten money in overseas accounts? This is how I look at it. Then maybe if they don't have the money, they will not be able to do a lot. And of course, with money from outside diaspora, we can support you in publication, in saturation. I think they're more helpful than stirring everybody really hot and cold and get somebody to go for a very unpleasant bloodshed. This is how this is my opinion.
Could you please pass to your left, Mark? You'll be in the next round.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Next round.
Thanks. Very inspiring, Harris. Maybe a few lessons for us here about getting information out to people who rely on AM commercial radio or the newspapers of Rupert Murdoch as their only source of information in Australia. I guess I wanted to ask you a question, about links that we can make as Australian activists here with what's going on in Malaysia. There's two. I know obviously there's been the stuff about Australian corporations like Linus who get the tick of approval from UMNO and all their cronies, but also going back to the issue that you raised at the start, Tony Abbott's apology about criticising their human rights records. He was always very selective about that because obviously he thought the human rights record of Nauru and Papua New Guinea was okay to send asylum seekers to. And I went in 2011 and met a whole range of refugee support groups in Malaysia who formed a bit of a coalition against what the Australian government was trying, to do. So I guess, are there other avenues, that we can, and speaking as a non-Malay, that we can raise to put pressure, I guess, on our own government and their sort of foreign policy priorities that they have? Because I think in a lot of ways they rely on the ongoing authoritarianism in Malaysia to sort of pursue their own interests as well.
Madam, if I understood your question correctly, they not only hold the wealth, the government, but any street protests or any attempts at taking power in the streets would be met with
Violence.
well, the arms. I assume you are referring to the security forces then.
Yes.
Right. Now, just to share with you all, in the run-up to the 13th GP, our intelligence reports that came back, the police in the south, Johor, that's all,
Sorry?
The police in the south, in Johor, had swamped. All right, now let me explain this. One of the biggest issues that we took to the ground and which resonated was the rising cost of living. Everybody feels that, the pinch in the pocket. Now the copper, the private who's on traffic beat, can stop your car and say, you were speeding, you were doing 90 in a 70 per km zone. Slip me a fiver and matters closed. But the boys in the military don't have that option. They don't have that opportunity to augment their income. And they feel the pinch. Civil servants, the rank and file today pack food from home and take to work because they can't afford to go to the stores. It's a serious issue on the ground. We in Abu launched our initiative to the military and the police. And the message was simply this: we're fighting for your kids too. And if the order comes to shoot, think about who you want to shoot. All right. Now, this is part of cyber. When Najib's regime, when UMNO understands that we've taken something like 2 million of those flyers out into the military bases, into the police barracks, you do not know when you hit the button if the projectile is going to fly. You do not know whether that campaign has had its desired effect. And truth be told, we too won't until we are out on the streets. And then we'll find out if it's had its impact. Now that's just half the story. The other half is this. UMNO BN counts on us fearing the retaliation and the brutality on the street. In that sense, I suppose per se 1, 2, 3 and the ISA rallies are something that perhaps the policing forces have never seen before. That we've got beaten and we've come back. And perhaps per se 2, per se 3, there was retaliation. As I said, a pacifist people will only take so much. So, is there the risk of brutality and arms and bloodshed? We don't ask for it. If we take to the streets, we will take it in a Gandhian stance. But we don't promise that we'll continue to remain that way. And you may fight us with your guns. We'll fight them with our spirit. That's all we have. Abu in Malay is asalkan bukan UMNO, and it translates beautifully into English using still ABU. It's anything but UMNO. and it's funny, even in the 12GE, this is the Malaysian the kampung thing. Give me a monkey and UMNO, I'll take the monkey. Looking at some of the opposition, I think they just did. They took monkeys. Class action. You want to take a class action? I'm pretty sure you didn't mean iron suits in Kuala Lumpur.
Outside.
Yeah, because the only course we have in there are the kangaroo time. You can try. I think the scope for creativity outside is limitless. And I think that's an excellent suggestion to freeze their assets. But I think information is scarce. You need those details. Lawyers will tell you that the courts will not entertain a fishing expedition. So unless you have ironclad facts before you, that Musa Aman and Taib Mahmud have got these accounts here and these are details, you won't be able to get court orders to disclose. But if that evidence and that information is available, I think that's an excellent move. Now, funding I said this just now and I'll say it again, funding is the lowest denominator. But you're right, it's a reality. Fighting a media war is expensive. We will be dependent on funding both from home and abroad. Yes, help us in any way that you can. I was merely pointing out that don't take out your checkbook, sign it, and send us a check and think, oh, okay, I've done my part. That's the lowest bid. That's the lowest bid. Be our international watchdogs. The question of what other links? Could you be more precise? What precisely do you need?
Well, I don't know, I guess I was trying to brainstorm other ideas. I mean, my passion is with the asylum seeker issue at the moment, and human rights and so on. But if you had other suggestions, I don't know, or comment about how that issue is being treated in
I've got to confess that the last 1.5 months, we have been on the ground. We have been on the ground, and we have been very focused on evaluating what really went wrong in G13. So I have not had my mind turned to other issues. But if you go to my blog, The People's Parliament, there's an email me link, and I'll be happy to brainstorm this with you and see where and what issues we can take further. I'll be very happy to.
First of all, Harris, I'd like to express my admiration for you. If I were a Malay and a Muslim like you in Malaysia, you could have joined UMNO, and you could be worth a few $100 million now, having a very comfortable lifestyle, and don't have to worry about being arrested by the special branch of every day of your life. Now, having brought up in the Malay village and only had Malay friends when I was young, I believe that for Malaysians to change government, you need to understand a few things. First of all, you need to understand the psyche of the Malays in the kampong, in the villages. Because to the traditional, the typical Malay folks, three things are the most important to them. As Rajapetra Kamarudin, RPK, has written, the 3 R's, that's what he calls it: race, religion, and royalty. And I believe the opposition politicians, including the DAP politicians, do not understand this. Give you an example. A few weeks before the GE13, Lim Guan Eng played up the Allah issue. What for? The DAP were expected to win in all their seats. It turned out to be right. So why did he have to raise the Allah issue? We saw what happened after that. PAS suffered. PAS went backwards because to the Malay folks, when there's an attack on their race and religion, especially religion, they would not compromise. They would swing back to UMNO. So what I'm trying to say is, it's better that the politicians in the DAP or even some in the PKR firstly got to understand the psyche, the thinking of the Malay folks, because that's where all the battles are going to be won, not in the urban seats. As you know, the gerrymander, one voter in the kampongs, is worth something like 3 or 4 or 5 in the urban seats. And secondly, I would say that to win, and this is what Anwar Ibrahim has been telling everybody, that to win the elections, the opposition's got to do very, very well in Sabah to start with, and later on Sarawak. That did not translate into, the plan did not work. Why? Because of too much infightings. And I don't know the nitty-gritties of why so much infighting there. Maybe you got ambitious people like Yong Tet Lee, who screws up everything. So, unfortunately, I share your pessimism. Malaysia is a basket case. And I got no idea how are we going to change it. Perhaps we need another 50 years when the country is really down the drain. We have a revolution there. But apart from that, you're fighting against a government that's got billions of dollars, or rather a party. But there's no difference between UMNO and the government. The government is UMNO, UMNO is the government. Now they have billions of dollars at their disposal. And you've got so many corrupt politicians here. So how are we going to change it? You can have demonstrations every day. They don't care. They just arrest you. Sorry to say that my father was in the police force before he retired. So I don't know how they work. They just come and arrest you in the middle of the night. And many of the Malaysians will just run away. You're going to be left with a few $100,000 to fight the whole government, the whole country. So how is it going to work? I'm very pessimistic. I'm sorry to say that. I think we need a few more years of critical thinking and planning.
Okay, it's so important to get the next. I'd like to take this before we get to the next question. Now, first of all, I'm not pessimistic. If I was pessimistic, I wouldn't be standing here. But, right? I'm not. I've got to continue to believe that there are enough good people at home and abroad who care enough, and that we will, God willing, make a difference. I completely agree with you that the opposition showed total incompetence in coming up with a plan to unify all opposing forces, not just the opposition parties, all opposing forces. I can share with you that some of the top leaders had great reluctance in working with UMNO. I mean, with a name like anything but UMNO, it's bizarre. I would get full cooperation with those at mid and lower level. I would get full cooperation with candidates. Candidates were knocking on our doors to say, can we have your material? Can we have your eagles to do the walkabout? And we had great success. And I'll tell you why. It's very simple. Psychologically, it's very simple. If you go to a BN ceramah campaign, election campaign, you expect to hear Pakatan bashing. And if you went to a Pakatan campaign rally, you'd expect to hear BN bashing. So listeners say we take a pinch of salt with what we're hearing there. But when you have civil society people come to you in the coffee shops, come to you in the farms, we had access to Felda. Opposition couldn't get into Felda. We got into Felda. Why? Because we said we're not from the political parties. We are rakyat coming to you with a message. And once they were convinced, or they believed that we were not from political parties, they would have to hear what we had to say. And our message was simply this: yes, from what we know, we are convinced UMNO BN must go. What we want to present to you is the same information to leave you to decide for yourself. And some of them, when they criticize Pakatan, they say we're not Pakatan supporters. But this is important. If we are able to remove BN, what we have learned is power is with the people. And if we can remove BN today, we can remove Pakatan tomorrow. When I was on the campaign trail, I brought this up. Pakatan had promised us reforms in 100 days if they took Putrajaya. And I said it was unrealistic. I said we would give them 200 days. That's double the time you have said. But I said if you fail, see us on the streets. So this is not something that we just took to BN. We said we are not voting Pakatan because we love you. You get our vote by default. Because we so despise the politics of UMNO Barisan Nasional. You have not done enough to endear yourselves to us. Now, I'll be honest, I've said this before, I'll say this again. Pakatan Rakyat by itself cannot bring BN down. They need to work a union with the political parties of Sabah and Sarawak. And yes, you said it. Sabah and Sarawak are critical to bringing UMNO BN down in Putrajaya. But post 13 GE, I walked away from it convinced that I cannot look to the politicians to lead us to the promised land. I cannot. I'll give you this one instance to sustain what I say. The minimum wage. Parti Socialist Malaysia, Parti Rakyat Malaysia, NGOs, NGIs, myself, we have been pushing for 1,005, which, my friends, is really the barest minimum that you need to give to the poor. BN says no, 900 ringgit. Pakatan says no, 1,001. But they both sing the same mantra as to why they cannot give us 1,005. Why? They say if we give you 1,005, we will kill the small and medium industries. Now, let me tell you how the small and medium industries survive. Their workforce is foreign driven. The foreigners, the Bangladeshis, the Myanmaris, the Nepalis come in, and they will take 600 to 700 ringgit a month because they share a room with 20 others. Whereas our local chap has 1 wife and 3 kids, and sometimes 3 wives with 9 kids. And he can't take that living arrangement. So there's absolutely no way he can take 600 a month. Now, on that note, I have to ask Pakatan, who do you represent? The capitalist industry or the 40% disenfranchised? Now, it is bearing that in mind that today I say we need a civil society leader to rise and to begin to set a benchmark. And immediately the person who comes to mind is Pak Samad or Ambika, because these two have endeared themselves to the masses. Politicians resort to political expediency. Sabah, I took this issue to Yong Teck Lee and to Jeffrey Kittingan. Pakatan had offered that they would give 20% royalty to Sabah for the oil. Now, I told Pakatan, what you are in fact saying is, you are smaller thieves than BN. BN steals 95%, you only steal 80%. It belongs completely, altogether, 100% to the people of Sabah and Sarawak. Had they not been cheated long enough? Pakatan says, Haris, you don't understand politics. I say, you're right. I don't. Yong Teck Lee says, no, we take 20% because it's not realistic to ask for so much so soon. Jeffrey Kittingan says, I will take 50%, and I ask them both, do you have a mandate from the people of Sabah to give up what is rightfully theirs? No. No, they have no mandate. But you go back and you tell them, this is the best deal we can take from Semenanjung. You don't tell them that this best deal you speak of is your own. Power sharing. We want change and they want power. We need to find that point where the change that we want becomes the dominating force. And for that reason, this round, I refuse to be subservient to a political leader who says, I will push the move for change. I want to see a civil society leader rise and set the tone for change and to lead the charge and to unite all opposing forces. And to me, I can only think of Pak Samad and Kak Ambika. Now, Sabah is critical. I was barred from entering Sabah in December 2011 after almost a year of working on the ground because we were about to kick off a statewide rally. We anticipated that I would be barred. So the bags carrying the material came on another flight carried by somebody else. The staff got in. All right? From now, and if we are looking at GE14, the work in Sabah and Sarawak is critical. Sir, I beg you, banish that pessimism. Understand that many on the ground are ready to work for change. Banish that pessimism. There is hope. There is hope, but the work awaits us. And you are right, Sabah and Sarawak are going to be the key factors that see the regime change in Putrajaya. I just wanted to respond to that.
So I reckon we'll take this last 2 questions and then I think with the timing, we'll then allow Haris to wind up. Yeah? Okay.
Are you talking about this concept of everyone thinking of themselves as a Malaysian? Because the crazy thing was that when I went overseas, when I was still a Malaysian, when people asked me what I am, I didn't say I was Chinese. I said I was Malaysian. So when I come back home, they compartmentalize me and say, look, you're a Chinese, and even though you're poor, sorry, no place for you. And unfortunately, things, got worse and worse as a Chinese and Malaysian origin. But having said that, I can actually see the principles driving the principles behind you driving all this talk and all that, and for that I actually admire you what you're doing, because I reckon it's actually quite a tough thing what you're doing, try to crack this Barisan shield really. But having said that, and I suspect I'm older than you, perhaps getting a little bit more realistic about things. Now, if you don't get ABU into a political organization, then and perhaps, even though Pakatan is not really all that ideal, perhaps then it will be just a question of you just banging your head against this. I get what you say about the common people rising up. And in fact, what I was going to ask you initially was that, are you saying that there is going to be, and that you will actually ask for change, fight for change, even though there's violence? And I gather what you're saying, yes, that's true. I'll talk to you privately about that issue. But basically, I'm saying to you that short of that kind of violent sort of movement, shouldn't you be seriously thinking about working with, even though it's not ideal, the alternative?
Hello. Well, asalkan bukan UMNO. I think that's part of the key. You break UMNO, we'll break like sort of the slavery that my Malay friends have. I have one question. It's made up of about 7,845 parts. So, but I'll just ask the top one. You say that Sabah and Sarawak are important. What kind of work, like sort of generally speaking, will you be doing to break the stranglehold that Barisan has in Sabah and Sarawak? I mean, it is extremely difficult to get into the interior of Sabah and Sarawak, as you probably know. So, how are you going to do it if you're not there?
I launched, this is the issue on, we should all be patient. I launched a project, I think around about 2008, called Project Irrelevant. Project Irrelevant. And it's actually something that I've been doing myself for the last 10, 15 years. You confront forms. You go to a government agency, you go to a bank, you want to apply for a loan, God, you need to fill forms. And I cannot understand those dumb questions. They want to know your race. They want to know your religion. They want to know your sex. So for me, Project Irrelevant was about this. If I faced a question saying race, it was irrelevant. Later it became Saya Anak Bangsa Malaysia. Religion, irrelevant. Sex, yes please. Alright, and Southern Man sent back the form and said, this is improper. I said, so what's your question? The point I'm making is this. It's down to us. You want to change something, it's down to us. And I've refused to put anything else other than Anak Bangsa Malaysia. And they finally relent. All right, they've crossed out and given me the other, and I said, no, I'm not changing this. When the police took my statement, the Saya Anak Bangsa Malaysia, they said, there's no such thing. I said, I don't care. It's either that or you get no statement from me. So it's Saya Anak Bangsa Malaysia. And if you persevere, you get it. Working with Pakatan, that's what I've been saying, we have no problem. I've worked with mid-level, I've worked with ground leadership, I've worked with candidates, no problem. I have no problem with them. It's the leadership that's got a problem with ABU. And it's plainly for this reason, because they expect us to be yes men. That if we see something that's not right in Pakatan, we are to look the other way. We're not going to do that. When the need arises, we'll kick them in the butt. Because that's why we're around. We're the watchdog. I agree with you. In the short term, there is no alternative to UMNO BN but the existing opposition. But as I said, Pakatan by itself cannot take BN down. Pakatan got to work with everyone else. And they need to understand that too. But my point is, in leading the charge, they failed last round. And therefore, I think we have given them that shot. They should not expect us to put our hopes in their basket in toto now. I'm saying the leadership must come from civil society to set, for instance, the reform agenda for the Rakyat. Now, I do not expect the politicians to come together and agree that it is time to honor the Malaysia Agreement of 1963. They will give us a slew of arguments, too much water has passed under the bridge, etc., etc. That's all poppycock. If you want to honor the agreement, you can, if there was political will. That has to come from the civil society. If we think we are honorable people, then it is time to honor the agreement of 1963. I've read the 20-point agreement. Nobody seems to be able to find the 18-point agreement that relates to Sarawak. But just looking at what I've seen, I am convinced Sabah and Sarawak were not intended to be the 12th and 13th states. They were intended to be independent sovereign nations. Together with Singapore and the Federation of Malaya, making up the Confederation of Malaysia. And a new federal constitution, a new constitution was to be drafted. That's been forgotten. Islam was never to be the religion of Sabah and Sarawak. But it now hangs like the proverbial millstone around their necks. We owe it to them to deliver to them that which was bargained for. But my fear is if we leave it to the politicians, hell will freeze over first. So it is in that regard that I say we look to a civil society leader to set the charge to bring down UMNO BN into Putrajaya. Now, what sort of work in Sabah and Sarawak? If I start to get into the nitty-gritties, would be akin to actually putting up our blueprint in neon lights for UMNO BN to see. Trust me, I do not have to be on the ground there. We have operatives. Let me just say, put it this way. PAS has a very good program on the ground. They call it Anangkat. They go in and they actually work to get themselves sort of living in somebody's house, somebody's kampong, so that they can exert their sphere of influence. Now, when you get into the most impoverished areas in Sabah, two items that are essential to them for their daily use, but which is expensive, is cooking oil and sugar. All right. Now, in many of the impoverished areas, not just in Malaysia, but even in other countries, you remember when we were in school, kids, the ice cream that was sold in a little plastic, all right? Okay, so what happens is sugar and cooking oil is also sold like that, so that it's small enough to be sold cheaply. But even that, some people can't afford. Now, if you can set up a network of little kiosks where those are sold, and you allow them to put it in the 3-5 exercise book as an IOU, you get your foot into the doorway. All right? But it has to be done under the radar. Once they start to befriend you, you then take up the plastic foldable table with the stools, and you now start to also sell teh tarik and roti bakar with the 3-5 exercise book. And you start to win them over. Friends, this works. On the ground, this works. The guy who helps you get the cooking oil and the sugar is your friend. Alright, and when you start to talk to him about, actually, why is it you don't get enough data? The minister, then you start to open up. And then if you have the chance, you have a little small TV, with the video player and you start to play the videos. And it works. It works. Okay, it's crude, though the tools may seem, that's how you get the message into the heart. Okay, so we will be I don't have to be physically there. We have our operators on the ground. Oh, you need to Q&A? Finish with Q&A. Okay. If you want to make a last. I'm told that we have no more time for Q&A and that I have the last hurrah. Again, I want to say thank you so much. This is in fact my last leg. I fly back tomorrow. This is in fact my first trip to Australia. I'll tell you, it won't be my last, as long as they give me a visa. My Malaysian, well, when I was at the dinner at Sydney, somebody rebuked me and said, I'm no more Malaysian, I'm not Australian, stop calling me Malaysian. Well, you can take a Malaysian out of Malaysia, you can never take the Malaysia out of me. I am so happy to see so many of you who have come out here, and I'm sure for many of you it's been a struggle. But it's good to see you doing well. I just want to tell you this. It's my closing story. In 2008, in Selayang, which is fairly urban, a young Malay boy aged 12 was running into disciplinary problems in school. He was constantly missing the last lesson. He had been put through disciplinary action, one after the other, but it continued. Finally, the headmaster called him up and said, unless you have a good reason, you're being expelled today. Now, this is not something I contrive in order to get you all teary-eyed. The boy broke down and he told the headmaster this. He said he has to run, he climbs over the school fence and he runs home, which is nearby, so that his older brother can take the school uniform and the shoes to attend the afternoon session. This is in an oil-producing country, a rich country. For every one of you out here, there are 12 at home. You cannot break up that system. And if we won't help,